Welcome everyone who's coming in. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom. So good to see everyone. Welcome. So we're going to begin with a wordless melody, a melody that should be familiar at this time of year, and it'll come back later in our service. Yanai, nai, nanai, yanai, nai, 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 yanai, yanai, nai, yanai, nai, 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 yai, nai, yai, nai, yanai, nai, 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 nai. So let's hear everybody. Yanai, nai, nanai, yanai, nai, 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 yanai, yanai, nai, nai, yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, yai, nai, yai, nai, 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 nai. One more time, let's see your mouths moving. Yanai, 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 nai, 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 yanai, yanai, nai, nai, yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, yai, nai, yai, nai, 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 nai. So once again, Shabbat Shalom. So tonight's service is actually a special festival service. A few times during the year, our liturgy changes up because we find ourselves in the midst of a holiday. In this particular case, it's Passover, but we also find ourselves in the midst of Sukkot in the fall. And so we actually use a different prayer book, and you're going to notice that some of the prayers are different. For example, we don't do L'chadodi, we do a different psalm, which is called Psalm 92, which normally we could do on Shabbat, but for time we don't. And so we'll do that tonight. And so I'm going to put into the chat for everybody a link to our prayer book. And throughout the course of the night, you can find and pull it up. It's different than your Shabbat prayer book. So again, you can go page 388. We're going to begin with lighting not only our Shabbat candles and blessing our Shabbat wine, but our Yom Tov candles and our Yom Tov wine, our special wine for this Passover Eve.
So the correct page is page 384.
Thank you. Page 384.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav b'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov.
We move now into our blessing of our wine.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ham v'ramamanu mikol lashon v'kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava Shabbatot l'simcha l'menucha u'moadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason et yom haShabbat hazeh ve'et yom chag hamatzot hazeh zman cherotenu mikra kodesh zeker litziat Mitzrayim. Yivanu v'acharto v'tanu kidashta mikol ha'amim b'shabbat u'mohadei kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon b'simcha uvsason hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat v'Yisrael v'hazmanim.
Amen. And so now I'm going to invite us, once again, if you just joined us, I'll put into the chat once more our prayer book. We're on page 388, a true page 388. And we're going to read together on the bottom of that page a special reading for the seventh day of Passover. We remember on this day our crossing of the sea so long ago. when Miriam, Moses, and all the Israelites sang this song to God. Adonai is my strength and song, who has become my deliverance. This is my God, whom I will enshrine. So too do we sing out in praise on this day of our redemption. Now, our tradition does a kind of a funny thing, and we're on the next page, page 390, because it's understood that Kabbalat Shabbat, right, that segment before we get into kind of the main meat of our service, the Baruch Hu and the Shema, is meant to be a kind of spiritual warm-up to get us into a place where we're ready to pray. Well, the funny thing is that we actually, according to our tradition, don't need that warm-up on the Shabbat that falls on Sukkot or on Passover. We're already there. And because of that, because we kind of can fully embrace the spirituality of the day, and we don't need necessarily a set of Psalms and L'chadodi to put us in a place to pray, we actually begin with the Psalm for Shabbat, and that's it for Kabbalat Shabbat before we move on. And so we're on page 390 as we sing together the words of Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat Tov Le'odol Adonai U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat Tov Le'odol Zamer l'shimcha elyon, zamer l'shimcha elyon, lehagid baboker chasdecha, emunatcha balelon, alei atzor ve'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor. Mizmor Shir, let's hear you. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat Tov Le'odol Adonai U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon U'Lezamer L'Shimcha I'll invite you, if you're able, and I know that for some of us it's hard to do because we need to be near our screen, and that's totally okay if you need to stay seated, to turn to the next page, page 392, as together we rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitgadal Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah V'yamad Yivrach Yirutei V'yamlich Malkutei V'chayechon V'yamechon V'chayeducho Beit Yisrael B'hagala Uvizman Kariv V'yemeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam u'lamei Amaya Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitbar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha B'richu, Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran mi'alama, V'yimeru, Amen.
We're going to move forward now, page 394 in our prayer books, the Baruch Hu. Yaidai, 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 Et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Tevorach Leolam Forward now 2 pages in our prayer book, page 296, a special prayer for the beauty of nature. We're seated together. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzivaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch Ata Adonai, Hama'ariv, Aravim. Page 398. Avat Olam Beit Yisrael Amchavta Torah u'mitzvot u'kimu mishpatim otanu lemadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu v'shopeinu v'kumeinu nasiach berukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Yihem chayenu v'yorech yameinu v'yorech yameinu u'vahem negeh Yomam v'layla, Yomam v'layla.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. We continue on page 402. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta baham v'shiftecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech u'shochbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha Leman tiskeru ve'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet.
One of the great things about being able to use the festival prayer book is sometimes there's great readings that we never really get a chance to do during the year. We're on page 405 as I'm going to read the reading on the bottom of this page, and I really want you to take it in because it's a beautiful sentiment. Doubting is but the forefront of faith. A faith in the infinite growth of an unbounded creation. A doubting age is one of restlessness and discontent with what is current. A doubt is an idea that is still alive. To doubt that the past has uncovered all things is to express faith that many things are still to be uncovered. To doubt that we have grown to our full stature and knowledge is to express faith that we may develop into beings of such power and dignity that we cannot as yet imagine what shall be. And so with that in mind, we're going to move to page 406 as we join together for the words of Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha Nedar B'Kodesh, Nora Tehilot Osef Elef, Malchutecha Ra'u Vanecha, Bokei Hayam Livnei Moshe uMiriam, Ze Eli Anu ve'amru Adonai Yimloch le'olam va'ed. Say with me. Yanai nanai, yanai nai 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 nai, yanai yanai nai, yanai nai 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 nai, yanai 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 nai 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 nai. Thus it is said, Adonai redeemed Jacob from a hand stronger than his own. Praise are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. We move now, we're on page 408 for the words of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Ushmor Seitenu Uvoenu L'chaim U'Shalom Me'ata v'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. So in a moment, we're going to move into our Amidah Prayer, the central prayer of our Friday night worship. And as we do, just a reminder that this is a special festival Amidah. And so when we move into it, you're going to see that there's going to be a little bit of a skip forward in our prayer book. So we say the words, and Moses declared the appointed festivals of Adonai and the people, Vayidaber Moshe et Moedei Adonai et Bnei Yisrael. And we then turn forward to page 468. And I'll put into the chat so that you can follow along with that as well. And I'll invite you, as you do, to really kind of pause at the prayers that are a little bit different, rather than just go through the motions, to see that not only is it Shabbat, and that needs to be celebrated, but this being the seventh night of Passover also is deserving of celebration too. And so if you're able, I'll invite you to rise as we open with Open My Eyes to Truth, and then we'll move into silence.
Open my eyes to truth. Open my hands to give freely. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love. Open my eyes to truth. Open my hands to give freely. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love. Adonai sifatayv tiftach, ufi yagi tehilatecha. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love.
We continue in silence. Page 492. O se shalom dimroma, Uya se shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, V'imru, Amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael. So as we do each week, we pause and we think of those who are ill and who are in need of healing, who are in need of a refuah shleima, a complete healing of body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so as we do, we're going to recall names, and I'll invite you as we do to put the names of people that you're thinking of in the chat. We're on page 371, and I'll put that into the prayer book so that you can follow along and you can sing along. And as we do each week, we're going to be scrolling a list of names into our chat and giving you a chance to reflect not only on those names, but the names that you're going to put in as well. There was no sound, was there? All right. Well,
We heard it.
people heard it?
Yeah.
We heard it.
I did.
So half of us heard it and half of us didn't.
Maybe some people are on YouTube.
No, they're not. You know what? Interesting conundrum to have, but let me just do the traditional one for those who need to pray it. So, Misha Berach Avatinu V'Imotinu Avraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov Sar Rivka Rachel Leah Hu Yivarech Et HaCholim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem V'Haklimam V'Rabotam V'Hachzikam V'Yishlach Lachem Mehera Refuah Shlema Mina Shemayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Hashta B'Agala V'Zman Karib Nomar Amen. So there we go. Interesting. I'll have to look tech-wise at why that was. But it seems to be about 50-50. We're going to move now into a section of our service that is called the counting of the Omer. The idea is that we're supposed to count the days from the second day of Passover until the very beginning of the holiday of Shavuot. It's about 7 or so weeks. And so we're going to move into our next phase of counting as we count day after day after day. And so what I'm going to do right now is tomorrow is going to be the 7th day of the Omer. Am I correct, Ronnie? I realize I didn't write it down. And so I'm going to actually Google this right now. Anybody want to correct me, help me out, figure this out?
I'm pretty sure today's the 5th day.
Second. So, yes, today is the 6th day of the Omer. So we're counting into the 6th day of the Omer. So with that, we're going to count the days, and I'll invite you, if you want, to turn to page number 570 with me. I'm going to put this into the chat for everybody to have. The fact that I didn't have sound threw me a little bit. So that's where I'm at right now. Here we go. So if you want to count with me, I'll do the blessing, and then you can follow along and count afterwards. Hareini muchanu mizuman l'kayem mitzvat aseh shel sfirat haomer. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. We say together the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Our praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. And we say, Hayom Hamisha Yamim LaOmer. Today is the 5th day of the Omer. So with that, we now have counted these days, and I get a chance to address you and to talk a little bit about where we are in our liturgical calendar, but also get a chance to reflect on the story of Passover and on this week's Torah portion. So we find ourselves on the 7th day of Passover. Now, for some of us, this is the last day of Passover. And for others of us coming up, we've got one more. Depends if you abide by the Israeli schedule or the diaspora schedule. And so some of us, I'm sure, will be eating our pizza tomorrow night. Others will be eating our pizza 2 nights from now. But it's customary tomorrow to read the story of the actual crossing of the sea. Now, why do we do that? Because Passover itself is this saga. And by the way, I always thought growing up that Passover, at least the beginning, the Seders, commemorated us leaving Egypt. In fact, we find ourselves in the story not necessarily leaving Egypt, but situated on the eve before we're about to leave. The first 2 Seders really commemorate the beginning of hurrying up to wait until we can sacrifice the Paschal lamb and we can go. And there's a little bit of a misnomer in the sense that, like, we always tell our kids, for example, that the reason that matzah is flat is because we left Egypt in such a haste that we didn't let our bread rise. But in fact, there was like a lot that we needed to do before we left. Not only did we have to get ready to sacrifice this lamb, not only did we have to spread its blood on the door, but we had to wait till the final plague happened and the firstborn died. We knew we were getting out. God told us we were about to leave, but yet we still had to wait. And that's why, by the way, that today, or really tomorrow, commemorates the fact that we finally crossed the sea to freedom. So it takes 7 days before we finally have that last plague, which, by the way, is the commemoration of the first day of Passover, is that passing over of the houses that causes Passover to get its name. We have that last plague. We leave. We walk in the desert for a little while. We get to the edge of the sea. Is that where hurry up and wait comes from? I'm not, probably not, actually. But we get to the edge of the sea, and finally the seas part, and tomorrow we walk to freedom, which is why tomorrow during services, we're going to read Shirat Hayam, this special portion that is what the Israelites sang as they crossed the sea. But I want to do just a kind of a close reading real quick of what Shirat Hayam is, because I, again, misnomer, always assumed that what the Jews were celebrating was their freedom. Raise your hand if you think that what the Jews are celebrating when they cross the sea is the fact that they are free. If you actually do a close reading of Shirat Hayam, they of course celebrate the fact that they're free, but what they actually are celebrating is God's might in killing the Egyptian army. Right? I'm going to sing to your might, O God, right? Horse and chariot have been thrown into the sea. That's actually the way it starts. Horse and chariot are thrown into the sea. And so from that moment on, the Jews are excited that they are free. They are relieved. We sing Micha Mocha to commemorate God's redemption. But notice, if you do a close reading of Exodus chapter 15, it's a little bit more toward the vindication line than it is toward the line of exuberance, of joy, of freedom. And that's something that is an interesting tension in our tradition. And I want to talk about this for a second because it's something that came up actually in my Melton class, which is the feeling that we get when we understand that many, many Egyptians died, right? The plagues are one thing, but then we watch as the whole army is completely eviscerated. So much so, by the way, that we're told that the army died ad echad, which could mean until every last one of them, though our ancient rabbis understand that to be all except one, which is Pharaoh, who drags himself out of the water and has to watch as all of his army drowns. But there's something really kind of upsetting, and I'm sure it upsets many of us, to think that when the Israelites crossed the sea, their first thought was, thank God the army was destroyed, not thank God we are free. And that ambivalence, that feeling that we can celebrate the destruction of another is something that we struggle with today. We brought up in my Melton class, and I kind of want to share this with everybody because it's an interesting question, that there's a famous midrash that talks about after God destroys the Egyptians, the angels in heaven start celebrating. In fact, they start singing praises to God. But the truth is, God immediately stops them. And he says, look, my children are drowning. This isn't a time to be excited. But what's interesting is that when our rabbis imagine the conversation, they imagine the conversation between God and angels. But humans are not angels. And therefore, when humans start celebrating, when they sing, God, you threw horse and chariot in the water, when they sing, who is like you among the other gods, God doesn't shush the people. In fact, God celebrates the fact that the people, especially the women, had the foresight to bring musical instruments out of Egypt so that Miriam could lead all the women with timbrels in hand. Because humans are supposed to have a complicated relationship to things like vengeance. They're supposed to have a complicated relationship to things like anger. And there's a lot that to be said about this distinction between what is human, what is angelic, and what is animal-like. And there are a few things that humans have, just humans. But more often than not, humans share either the higher things with angels or the lower with animals. And if you think about that urge, that bloodlust, that desire to just get vengeance and to be happy at the downfall of your enemy, we often call that our reptilian brain, right? That's the stuff of emotion. That's the stuff of anger. That's the stuff of rage. That's the stuff almost that is carnal about us. It is our id coming out in that moment. And that's actually what we experience when we read the Song of the Sea. We see the id alive in the Jewish people. We see the animal come out. Now, what's interesting is that we often need that other mediating force. Freud called it the ego or the superego to kind of help mediate and moderate those feelings. And so no sooner do we celebrate than we find ourselves marching through the desert until we get to the foot of Mount Sinai for the holiday of Shavuot. And we get not only the whole Torah, but even within the 10 Commandments. Questions around jealousy, right? The 10th commandment, don't covet what is your neighbor. Leviticus 19, which says that you shouldn't seek vengeance, right? And we're told to be careful with our anger. Moses actually becomes this paradigm for what anger can do. And we are supposed to use the law, the Torah, the ethics of Judaism to mediate and moderate that. But the truth is that we can't escape it. It is who we are as human beings. And there are going to be times where we just need to let it out. And that's exactly what happens. Now, when we do, there are middle ground. So I told this story actually to my class, but I want to tell it to you as a whole because I think it's really instructive, which is, raise your hand if you remember the night when you found out that Osama bin Laden was killed. I'm curious, just kind of a poll of hands. Raise your hand if a piece of you was like, we got him. So that's not an unheard of reaction. In fact, that is the reaction, right, of the Jews as they cross the sea. But there's a fine line between feeling something, right, and celebrating it actively. And that's where I think our people go a little bit wrong. You're allowed to look at the drowning Egyptians and you're allowed to say, like, let that feeling kind of come and say, you know what, this is justice at work. But what you're not allowed necessarily to do is to, what I saw, I happened to be in DC that weekend, go down to Lafayette Square in front of the White House and basically have a big party with everybody, which is kind of what happened on the night Osama bin Laden was killed. Because he's still a human being. And by being a human being created in God's image, we understand that even God is mourning that death. Not necessarily because God disagrees that justice needs to happen from time to time, but rather because God understands that created in God's image, someone could go astray, and it is a crying shame when that happens and justice comes to it. And so I want us to kind of keep and bear that in mind. And as we hear the Song of the Sea, whether you come tomorrow to services or not, I want you to rewrite lines in your head. Because we often have a choice between whether or not to celebrate the destruction around us because we've got that urge for bloodlust, or rather to celebrate with joy the fact that we are free. And the more that we can turn the attention to ourselves, when those that we disagree with, when our enemy falls, the more that we are able with integrity to truly celebrate the moment without the ambivalence of understanding that we cannot and should not celebrate all our animal lusts, even though some of them are warranted to feel in the moment. Our goal is to figure out how law can mediate ourselves. The Jewish people weren't expected not to crave vengeance yet. They weren't expected not to keep their anger in check. They weren't expected not to have a kind of jealousy, not to have a schadenfreude about them, because the Torah had not been given. But we have the Torah now, and the Torah corrects for that. And hopefully as people who ostensibly take Torah seriously because we are here and because we learn each week, the goal when faced with a decision, whether or not to celebrate our enemy's destruction, is to turn away from that, apply the ethics, and understand that there is a place for joy, but it is the joy of our freedom, not the pain of the other. Shabbat Shalom. So with that, we're going to move to Elena. We're on page 586 in our prayer book, and I'll invite us to rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu ki goyei haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
We move forward in our prayer book 5 pages.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
We turn now in our prayer book to page 598 as we move into the Mourner's Kaddish. And as we do, we recall the following individuals: Ronald Abbott, Emmanuel Abraham, Sidney Ackerman Jr., Esther Keels, Baff, Kenton Benedict, Harold Berman, Blanche Bernstein, Ethel Bach, Rosa Cohen, Harvey Komita, Rudolph Gross, Joseph Hammer, Martha Henley, Gary Jacobs, Samuel Kaplan, Sarah Laura Keels, Milton Keels, Herbert Kramer, Louis Liebling, Paul Louis Seltzer, Phyllis Mallister, Barbara June Menkes, Luis Nazaire, Sidney Pimes, Ann Paulin, Ida Radish, W.T. Rooney, Alma Rose, Gilda Savitt, Leo Schneider, Edward Serlin, Francis Simkowski, Beryl Sondick, Morris Spitz, Rose Stelzer, Vincent Urzo, Caroline Weichsheimer, Barbara Weiser, Patricia Woodward, Julia Yassin, and Stephen Zeisel. And those who are in their Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning: Violet Lavenda, mother of Diane Lavenda; Neil Robert Elson, brother of Linda Indek; Edith Shavat, mother of Carrie Shavat; Michael Kahn, father of Gregory Kahn; Richard Nealis, brother of Sharon Rosen; and Jerry Catalone, uncle of Aaron Javier. I'll invite you to put other names of people that you're thinking of into the chat. And I'll invite you to rise as together we join in the ancient words of Kaddish. Yikadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yamad divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon v'yomachon v'chayet l'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amin. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Tamiram bi'alma v'imru amin. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amin. Oseh shalom b'bramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amin. Please be seated. So, a few announcements before we finish. Tomorrow morning, services are at 10 a.m. They are our festival morning services as well as our Shabbat morning services. So I hope you'll tune in. We'll read the Song of the Sea. We'll also study a little bit from the Book of Song of Songs, which is traditional to read at the end of Passover. And then on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock is our Yizkor service and our festival service for the 8th day of Passover. If you can make it to either Saturday morning or Sunday, please, if you can do, especially for Yizkor, it's really important that we have a minyan. And so if you can help us to make that minyan, it would be very, very helpful. East of Eden book discussion, led by Norm Pollock, is going to be April 4th. And then on April 5th, we're really excited to have a really great conversation between author Joy Layden and Seth Marnin. Joy wrote a book called The Soul of the Stranger, Reading God and Torah from a Transgender Perspective. And it's a phenomenal book. I read it with like a couple congregants that I had asked to read alongside me, and it was so good. I called up Joy and I asked Joy if Joy would speak. It really helps us understand the characters of the Torah, God, the stranger, through using queer theory and a new lens in which to see Torah. It changed one of my lenses that I used to see Torah through, and it's really wonderful. Also, just a reminder, we have a grandparent support group every single month. And so make sure to check out not only the grandparents support group, but also I think coming up next week is the support group for people with aging parents. So you should check that out. Yomashoa is also coming up. Yomashoa is Holocaust Remembrance. That's April 7th. It's our communal Yomashoa commemoration. But we're actually blessed that a congregant of ours will actually be the featured speaker. So Liz Peters will be speaking about her parents' experience in the Lodz ghetto in Poland. Fascinating story, and Liz is a very polished speaker. In addition, on Sunday, April 11th, we're really excited that there's a conversation happening between Mohammed Darweshi and Jody Rudoran. Mohammed is a Palestinian citizen. He lives outside of Nazareth, and he has become this kind of like bridge between the Palestinian community and the Jewish community. And he's going to talk about some of the nonprofit work that he does. He's a really kind of talented speaker. And look, if we were in person, we'd be serving you brunch, but grab a bagel and come to this Sunday morning event. After that, look, there's tons of other stuff going on. I want to plug one final thing, which is the Tnt Wellness Challenge. So our annual fundraiser this year, we want to do it outside, and we need it to be kind of in a socially distanced way. So it's actually going to be a 5K run walk. And depending on what the levels of COVID looks like, we'll either all start together or we'll start in waves every couple minutes. But the idea is that you'll come, you'll do it. We'll give you a bag lunch to go. Following that, there's actually a mitzvah day at the synagogue where you can do projects in a safe way. And our goal this year is to net $15,000 for our budget. And so if you can help us do that by either running or sponsoring a runner, it would be wonderful. Ronnie, do you have anything to add?
Sometimes we might have to do walking and not running, but that's cool too.
Yeah, I said run walk, didn't I?
Well, in the end, you said just run. I said to plug in for the walkers. There also is a piece of it that's going to have some young folks in it too. So Shoresh will be involved as well. And I'm sure we could rope our grandkids into doing something as well. I just have two plugs that come a little bit after. On the 13th of April, there will be a Rosh Chodesh that evening. And on Saturday, the 17th, there's a Havdalah Plus, because I know everybody needs to schedule that far in advance.
Great. All right. So with that, we are going to move into our closing song. And so you probably don't even really need the words for this one. The words are just Dayenu. Ilu hotzianu b'Mitzrayim hotzianu b'Mitzrayim Dayenu 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 Ilu natan lanu et Shabbat natan lanu Dainu, 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 Dainu. All right, so hop off mute.